During the public presentations and public comment portions of the meeting, participants may raise their virtual hand to be recognized if not signed up to speak. If this meeting is disrupted, we will recess for 5 minutes and return. If that does not correct the issue, the meeting will end and be rescheduled. Sammy, the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And a roll call, please.
We have, excuse me, Councilor McConnell is present. Patty, can you hear us?
I can now. Thank you.
Mayor Smith and Councilor Bell, Councilor Fox, Councilor Lehman. I have Councilor Blaine and Councilor Alexander absent.
Okay, you have a quorum.
Yes, we do.
All right, thank you, Sammy. As I warned you, 2021 is going to be a busy year for us, and I appreciate your dedication to these extra meetings that we're going to have. It's pretty much going to be 2 a month for a while, as we've got a lot of big issues to cover. This special meeting prior to the work session came up because of a last-minute opportunity for a grant. So I'll let Ann present that to you and explain, and we'll move forward. So Ann.
Thank you, Mayor. We continue to get grants.
I'm sorry. Let me cut you off.
Okay.
I want to ask if there's any citizen testimony at this time.
There is not.
Okay, thank you. And therefore, any response from city council members? Seeing none, we'll move on. All right. Thank you, Ann. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. We continue to get opportunities for grant funding, and what I said to the mayor this week was we will take opportunity where we can, and sometimes we have to look at them and just say we can't. Even if we got the money, we can't get her done. This particular one is a Travel Oregon grant, and it is another grant to enhance the livability, the welcome to visitors, and the ability to enhance our downtown businesses by providing space for people to gather. So this is a resolution 2104 authorizing us to apply for this grant. It's requests up to 100,000. We'll probably be asking for 100,000. The purpose is to create a pop-up plaza. So this is an upcoming thing that's happening all over the country, and that is that you take a section of a downtown and temporarily you create a pop-up plaza, and it's something that can be moved. So it could be in one street at one time. Maybe there's a festival and it's best suited for one street, and then it might move to another street on another day, or it might end up in one place permanently. And so that's what we hope will happen in the end. But for this summer, we'd like to do a pop-up plaza near the Pavilion Park. We actually had hoped that the chamber could write this grant, but it turned out they could not. So the city is the appropriate writer of this grant at this time. We will be looking at picnic tables that have awnings built over the top of them. They could have charging stations on them so people can charge their phones, or they can plug in their phones and order food from our restaurants, hopefully. There would be some signage, trash receptacles, and possibly some games and activities. We initially thought that we might consider fire pits, but I think that that's going to take a little bit more thought before we jump into something like that. So we've kind of decided to forego that piece of it for this year. If funding allows, when we get all done, then we would consider a trailer to store it all in. So this grant is for the council to approve us to write it, and it is due tomorrow. So we've been working on it, and we will get it filed tomorrow. We did have a meeting with Travel Oregon today on the grant that we already received, and they really encourage that this grant connects to the other grant. So in the same area, we would provide a pop-up plaza where we're also building the bike hub. And so it would be a really good area for the community to gather. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Councillor Fox.
Would there be any road barriers so that if you were doing it in the middle of the street, that would prevent traffic from entering?
We've had some discussions. Initially, we talked about temporarily closing Mackenzie between Pearl and the park, and we talked to the business owners there, and they were not in favor. They were a little bit nervous about that. So more likely it would go into Pavilion Park right there on the side of Mackenzie, where the trees and stuff are, or it could possibly go on to Harrison and create a one-way on Harrison temporary. It might be a good way for the community to try that out for a little bit to see how a one-way on Harrison, that would stop the fast traffic from turning on Harrison and heading out to Pearl at a high speed past the park. So we have had discussions about that. So right now, I mean, temporarily, I would guess it would go in the park, but it could possibly go out onto the street for certain events during the summer. Councillor Bell?
In reviewing this, it doesn't look like there's any matching funds. Am I reading that correctly?
There is not matching funds, but it always looks good to match funds. What we're putting into the grant is we're matching funds for our public works team, because we can't do something like that without their involvement, whether it's the ground prep or whatever we're going to have, they're going to be involved. So we were going to put $10,000 of matching funds in for volunteer and staff time. It could be that the park committee might do some stuff, but so we will be putting in staff time as matching funds. Councillor Fox?
So what will staff need to do? What staff time is involved?
So one of the things we've talked about was creating kind of a patio type area in the park on the side of Mackenzie. If that was, we want to meet with the park committee. If they like the idea, then we would put in like a paver type floor on it, and then the tables and stuff would sit on the pavers. And so that is something that the public works crew could do, or just preparing the site. So they also would be in charge of the trash receptacles, which they already pick up the park garbage. So we any number of things that they could do when the stuff came in, there's going to be things that probably need to be put together and placed. So it just would take some of their time to do it.
The pavers would be temporary or permanent?
It just depends. So initially it's a temporary pop-up plaza, but if people can agree on where it should go permanently, it would become permanent. So it's just a matter of we think we know where it needs to be placed, but we really want to get the buy-in of the park committee before we do that. But we're hoping that it would be a permanent placement in the first summer.
So it just seems to me, and then I'll shut up, that if you're having a temporary one, some sort of firm base should be available because of rain and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to think about the concept of a plaza. And if
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think the key is that the temporary pieces, that the equipment we buy can be moved. So if we decided for an event that we needed to move the plaza, say we want to move it over to the other park for a event, then it's a movable plaza.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor McConnell?
So 2 questions. What size will it be? And will it remain up during the winter months or just during the summer months?
Well, I think that the tables we're trying to get 4 to 6 tables that would sit 6 to 8 people. They're round tables that have kind of an umbrella top on them. They are a hard top, so they could be in the winter, they could still be out. And so it just depends on what's the best fit. Garbage cans, of course, can be out year round.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Fox?
So within the budget, is funding included for the staff time to set it up and tear it down? Or are we gonna have to put that into our own budget? Or we do a year one where it's included in the grant and then we have to take over?
Well, so this grant wouldn't take part until next year. So we would, staff time is staff time. We budget it in the budget. So it would be a next year's budget. We wouldn't, so we would budget for it if we get the grant. We'll hear before budget season. So the timing is to design it in April, May, and seek bids and actually try to get it constructed in July and August. So that would be in the new fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, we would just have to anticipate how long it takes to set up and tear down.
Yeah.
Do we have temporary staff or whatever?
Councillor McConnell?
So do you have pictures to kind of give us an idea of what it's going to look like?
Megan would have, but she had an issue with her computer, so she couldn't be here tonight, but they are very cool tables that have like a hard cover on top, round tables with benches. It's all attached. You can order them with 1 seat removed so that you're including wheelchair accessible tables. So we have looked at those as well. So I'm sorry, I don't have a picture of them right now.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Fox?
Can she send them when they become available so we can get a visual? Because I was going online. Vancouver apparently is leading the way in this concept, but beyond that, there's not much out there.
Absolutely, I could send them out in the Friday report.
That'd be great.
Great.
I'll get a picture of them and we'll get it out to you.
Councillor Bell?
Last question. If neighborhoods were having a neighborhood party or a block party, could they borrow this if it isn't set up permanently?
I think that would depend on the weight of them. They're extremely expensive tables. These are not folding tables. These are extremely expensive. They come out to be about $10,000 a piece.
Wow.
Because of the heavy material they're made out of, and also the solar charging roof on them. So the other piece to our thought behind this is it's a resilient type thing. So if the whole city's out of power, we have stations that people can go from their home and charge their cell phones. So we've already got one concept working on that, and so this was another idea of this emergency planning on when we're purchasing things, thinking ahead. And so I'm not sure if they would be that movable. And Brian, I know you looked at them with Megan. Do you see them as being movable?
They're going to have to be if it's portable. So,
But I mean, yeah, but I mean for like a neighborhood to borrow them.
I mean, ultimately they could, but I think that we would have to take it to wherever that location is and set it up, and then when they're done, we'd have to come take it down.
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, I just can't imagine that we would allow for just anybody to come pick them up and take them away and then bring them back.
Yeah, it seems
Councilor
like we would
Fox?
have other portable options that
Yes.
could fill that need.
But it is portable. I mean, even though they're heavy, because Brian indicated, if it's pop-up, that.
It's portable.
So, on Councilor Bell's question, the city could have a surcharge to, so that they pay for the, it's thinking outside the box, and we should move on.
Sure.
But I see that as a
Absolutely.
potential, as long as you pay and you have a deposit and whatever, so that you can make a slight profit on it too. You would value added, so to speak.
There's a good idea. All right.
Any other questions or discussion? You have anything else, Ann?
I don't. I think this is just a great opportunity to continue to enhance the downtown, to welcome visitors. When I was on a call today, Travel Oregon was talking about Coburg being the only city in the area that is truly bikeable from the rest of the region safely. So Coburg Road is a relatively safe road. People can come out and have dinner here, ride their bikes out, have dinner, ride back home, and get there before dark in the summer. And I would see this and Travel Lane County is very excited about the bike hub. So I see this all as coming together as a marketing for Coburg, for our restaurants in the summertime, and for our visitors to come ride their bikes here, spend some time. But we're really limited as where we can sit visitors around here. We have some park benches and a few picnic tables, but we don't have a lot of places for people to stop and rest. And we have a great open space park, but if the pavilion's rented, or the shelters rented, then we really don't have places for people to sit and rest. And I think this really enhances that ability for us to welcome visitors and convince them to spend a little time and money here.
Well, and with the COVID and seeing the outside dining, where I know Brian moved picnic tables over to the Pavilion Park to accommodate people sitting in the park there to eat with the outside dining. And I think that's something that really shows the need for it. And I think this is a great opportunity to help fill that need. Okay, without any further discussion, I would entertain a motion. Councilor McConnell.
I move to approve Resolution 2021-04, a resolution authorizing the application to Travel Oregon for the Competitive and Recovery Grant Program for an amount up to 100,000.
Okay.
And do I have a second?
Second that.
Counselor Bell. So we have a motion by Counselor McConnell and a second by Counselor Bell to adopt Resolution 2021-04. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand in front of your camera. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes unanimously. I see somebody coming on. Sammy, do you know any of these?
Thank you, counselors.
Good luck. Okay, hearing no further comment, I'm going to close the special session of the City Council at 6:10 p.m. And at 6:10 p.m., we will begin our work session on the possibility of a transportation utility fee. Is Ann giving the presentation?
So tonight I have a PowerPoint that I will share with you and we'll go through it quickly. Then depending on the discussion and how the counselors want to proceed, I have a financial sheet that we can play a little bit with to do some scenario testing. Or we can look at the ordinance, the ordinance that you as counselors gave input on and answer questions on the ordinance. On the PowerPoint, there's also a list of questions that need to be answered. I tried to give answers, the input that I had received to date on that, so that if we just want to stick with that page, then we can just answer the questions if you want to move forward. So Sammy, if you wouldn't mind putting the PowerPoint up, Sammy's going to run it for me since my computer is just not cooperating today. We'll go ahead and get started with looking at the PowerPoint. Some of these slides you have seen before and some of them are new. And there's new information from last year. So that will be some interesting things to share with the council.
Just a second, please. Okay. Somebody let me know when you can see it.
We can see it.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Okay, so we can go ahead and go forward to page 1. So this is just a reminder of how we got here. So definitely started with the public concerns about the conditions of the streets. We updated our pavement management report and delivered it to the city council, and the city council then formed a committee to look at the street conditions and make recommendations for funding. That committee actually worked a little bit over a year and made a recommendation to the council. We also provided brochures, designed brochures, and distributed them to the community regarding this project. And we started the work on an ordinance for the project. Then just as we were getting ready to begin finalizing the ordinance to bring it to city council, COVID hit and the council put the discussion on hold. So we are here to revisit and to see if the council would like to move forward. So
Ann,
yes.
I'd like to make sure that we have one very important point in there that committee recommended that we raise our fuel tax, and that was put on the ballot and obviously approved.
Yes, that, good point. Thank you. Yeah. And we are receiving great fuel taxes from that. It's going very well. So can we move forward, Sammy? And go ahead and go again, one more. So we didn't change this slide up because we haven't done a ton of work yet on the roads. So we have, you know, some very poor conditions. We have some new roads that have better conditions. Residential, we have a 61 PCI average, which is pretty low. We would really love to see an 80 at least to 100. In industrial, again, it's pretty low, and our collector streets are very low. So there's definitely some work to be done, and especially on our collector street that get a whole lot of traffic. Move forward. So this is just a graph to show what the cost is usually if you take care of the work with a preventive maintenance versus reconstructing the road. And that reconstruction figure from 50 to 110 has changed. It's higher now than it was when you may have seen this before. I believe it used to be about $20 to $30 to $100 a square foot, and the engineer encouraged us to bump that up. So we really do want to consider that preventive maintenance is as important or more important than reconstruction because it prevents reconstruction. I know that our public works director would very much, and he's here and he's welcome to chime in on this, that preventative maintenance is so very important, and we need to be getting ahead of the fixes on our road so that we're not having to rebuild them from the base up. So go forward. Deferred maintenance really is a very high ticket, a dollar item, that when we have to go down to the base and rebuild a road, the cost is much more expensive and much more complicated to do. It disrupts the flow of the roads for an amount of time where preventative maintenance can be done in a couple days. But it also is at a very high cost. So this is just a slide that, I'm sorry it's so small on your screen. I can send this PowerPoint out so you can look at but basically it's just saying that it's roads are like a body, is that if you're seeing your doctor and taking care of your health problems, then you're going to be healthier, you're going to live longer than if you ignore them. And the roads are very similar, is that if we ignore the unhealthy conditions of the road, we're going to have a lot of work to be done and construction on roads, versus if we're taking care of those easy fixes early on. Go forward. So initially, when we started this process and when we got the street report, we were looking at about $2.5 million to bring all streets up to a healthy level. We've had a lot more time to look at our streets now. We've had the engineer look at some of our streets, and especially on Roberts Road, as you can see, to fix Roberts Road, which is a highly trafficked road with big trucks on it, it is a substantial cost to rebuild that road. And that road is, the majority of it is failed. If you've been down there, there is some serious problems on that road that need to be fixed. So our cost, as staff has looked at it, had discussions, we have restated the cost to 3.8 million. But we do have some opportunities for funding that we are going to talk about tonight, that will kind of bring down what we need to complete to 2.3 million. So while Roberts Road's definitely raising the bar in the total overall price, we have some opportunities, and we've already received some grant funding, so we can move forward. And we tried to share what those are. So the city has been funded to fix our collector streets. And so that map shows which streets would be fixed with this funding. This is approximately $850,000 project, with the city providing $100,000 of it. We have already secured the funding for $750,000 of it. So this is not information we had initially when we started this process. This can be utilized in 22 to 24. So next fiscal year to 24 fiscal year, we could get this work done. This is Roberts Road. This is the $1.6 million project, which includes, if you've been down there, since we did a small amount of Roberts Road, it would be a continuation all the way to the end, to the cul-de-sac. And so this actually qualifies for regional funding. It is a collector. So we can apply for funding to fix this road between 24 to 27 in the new STIP grant funding cycle. And this is another piece that is, we applied for this before and we did not receive funding, but we can also ask, we can resubmit the same project and it would likely be funded. A lot of times if you put a project in through the STIP funding, you might not get it the first time, but you're likely to get it the second time. So we could submit this project again, or we could submit the Roberts Road. I would think that we probably wouldn't get them both, but there's no reason why we couldn't put them both in and try. And so we will be doing that. This is a map of the streets. Initially, that was a plan for what would be treated when. And so as you can see from this map, and it was a very original map, which needs to be updated, and Brian and Burke are looking at it. The reason I wanted to show you this is because it shows Roberts Road as being, I'm sure it shows it as being partially preventative and crack seal, but not as much as a rebuild that we really know that needs to take place there. So this will be updated prior to us going anywhere with this map after we have this conversation. Go ahead. So I don't know how much we need to go over this, but what a transportation utility fee is, it's charged on the monthly billing. All properties pay a fair share based on their use of the transportation system. It's imposed citywide. You can either propose it and adopt it from now till forever when the council decides to not charge it, or you can charge it for a limited amount of time. You might say we're going to do it for 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, and then we're not going to charge it anymore. Sometimes cities do that while they're getting the roads into a proper condition that they can maintain with the funds that are available to them. Many times you would want to keep charging it so long as there's debt involved, because you need to have those revenues to pay off the debt that you've incurred in order to fix the roads. It does provide a stable source of revenue, so we can depend on it when we're going out to get funding, or for the maintenance and operation if the council decided that maybe we're going to charge a certain amount for the first 5 or 7 years, and then we're going to drop it down, and that's just going to be for maintenance and operations going forward. It's a stable funding source. And then it's a standardized assignment, so however we decide to charge it, it's standardized across the board. So the street funding committee recommendation came in with a $10 per month per residential unit charge, and then a $7 to $10 per trip equivalent unit to businesses. And what that would mean is that every business sector has a national trip average, and that is taken times 1,000 square feet of business space. So each business would be charged differently depending on what they do and how many employees they have and how much time, how much of the road or transportation their business takes up. Funding sources at this time, we have gas tax receipts of $150,000 to $180,000. I suspect we're going to see it higher than that. People are traveling. I've talked with Jim Anderson out at the truck stop. He said that there's no slowdown. People are traveling. There's a lot of cars on the road. We do get state shared revenues of about $93,000 a year. We get the Oregon Small City Allotment Grant. So that's $100,000 per year. You can apply every year, but you can't have any more than 2 projects at once, and they have to be shovel-ready projects. So it's easy to say, okay, well, we're just going to apply every single year for this. But the issue with it is lots of times it takes 2 years to get a project done. By the time you get the funding, then you go through a design phase and then a construction phase. It takes 2 years. So sometimes it doesn't work out to apply every single year, but we can have up to 2 projects going at once. So we can look at that and just see how often can we apply for this and actually get the work done. Business Oregon does have the Special Public Works Fund for funding up to 15 years. For roads, I believe that's limited to 10. So we would only be able to fund over a 10-year period. So this is just explaining how a business code trips per day times 1,000 square feet gives you your associated trips. So if a beauty salon has 75 trips a day and has 1,000 square feet, then that slide shows how that would be charged. So can we go back one, Sammy, please? What happened? We lost the PowerPoint.
We lost Sammy.
PowerPoint ran amok.
Okay.
Have computer gremlins in that city hall.
Today has been rough. I'm not sure what's going on. Can we just go to the first financial spreadsheet? We don't need this one. Okay, so right here, let's just stop here. Go back to $7. So let's just look at $7. If we were to, basically what I'm trying to show here is if we were to charge $7 for businesses, then it over the years between 23 and 29, we're starting to dig into a red zone. We're not covering our expenses without borrowing money. So if you notice up top, we don't see a debt, a loan being administered to the city. So so we're going in the red. We're starting up at the top with $650,000 in beginning fund balance, and at the end of the year, at the end of the cycle, we're ending up in the red, but we're $550,000 less than we were when we started in the street fund. So go ahead and go forward, Semi. So this is just looking at $8 if we were charging $8, and go ahead and go forward. Then the $8.50, go to 9, and then there's 10. So if we're putting funding in, and we're starting to put funding in, then at the end, we're starting to look a little bit like we started. So we're not dragging the street fund down entirely. Can we go forward? Because I feel like I had others that.
Tell me when, Ann.
So can we just, okay. So this is, if we were to go ahead and get the funding, we put in the utility fee. I'm sorry, this is so small on this little computer I'm having to use that I'm having to really read it.
I'm going to bring
So
you a copy.
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time reading it. If we were to apply the utility fee of $5 residential fee and $5 equivalent unit fee for businesses, we're starting with $650,000, and in the end, we're really at. I'm sorry.
No, give me a minute to get that.
We're really still not getting there. We're staying in the green, but we're not staying healthy as far as a fund. We're dropping off by $450,000 in the fund, and so that's not a good place to be, because we don't want to drop the fund down that low. We always need to have some funds available for emergencies, for making sure that we have enough for operations and personnel. So we can go ahead and move forward, Sammy. So this is, if we were not to charge the fund at all, and we only do the work we can afford to do, then, you can get about $1.2 million done over 13 years or 11 years. But the fund ends up, much lower. It's going to be much more expensive because we're putting the work off. So we're not getting it done. Getting the work done in upfront, borrowing some funding based on that is backed up with revenues from the SDC is a better idea for the city to get the work done up front and not spread it out like this, because we won't get it done. It'll be a vicious cycle of trying to get it caught up, but at the same time, roads are continuing to deteriorate. So, and this is just a 2031 and beyond. If we got the work done, and we were able to continue to charge the that we don't charge the utility fee, and we're getting state shared revenues and the city fuel tax. We're getting about $100,000 a year in preventative maintenance done. Then while we're somewhat lower in the fund, we are making it in the green after we get the work done. This is historic data. I don't think it's going to be very helpful for tonight, so we can go past this. These are all projections, so there's a lot of things that influence it. Development definitely influences it. How much of SDCs do we have available to put towards projects? How much gas is sold? How much is the state going to have available for shared revenues? The cost of construction and the economy, and grant funds available. So right now, there's definitely waves of what is being funded. We may see some transportation grants coming out in the near future, because it seems to be something that the federal government is moving towards funding. But we're also seeing other infrastructure grant funding coming out that is not transportation. So it's just a matter of what is going to be funded at any given time, depends on who's in the office. And so this is based on projections to the best of our ability. So we can move forward, Sammy. So council decisions. So some of the things that we talked about with the ordinance, and I had council input on them, was that a standard fee for residential, did it need for a single family dwelling? The council input that I got back was that it should be $10. A standard fee for businesses by class or equitable trips. We didn't get a real clear input from the council on whether it should be class or equitable trips. We did get questions about what's best for the staff, what's going to be the easiest for the staff to manage. And that definitely would be by class, because it would better fit into the financial software that we have right now. But the council was the input was that it would be $7 per equitable trip for businesses. Will it be set fee or beginning fee with a step ups over 5 years? That there wasn't a lot of input on that. Would the council consider row sidewalks, street trees, and included in the TUF? And then consider removing the $2 tree fee from the bills. We did get some feedback on counselors, and I think that could be something the council could decide, that we would cover the medium strips with the trees in it as part of it, and then you could remove the tree fee. Will we allow for appeals? We had counselor input. 1 said no and 2 said yes. Will we allow for income, low income? All counselors that gave input said yes. Will we allow for waivers? So this would be someone to apply to say they should not pay it. This could be something like a nonprofit operating in the community asking for a waiver to not have to pay it. 1 counselor gave input of a no, 2 said yes. Will the city charge itself for a TUF? I didn't really get feedback on that, but I would question from going through the LID and the city charging itself for LID, that kind of didn't make sense. But if we're charging every property, then that decision would need to be made. Will we charge other governmental units? This would be like the fire department and the school. 1 counselor said yes and 2 said no. Will the city charge exempt organizations? So this could be Serenity Lane, same as above. The council will have to decide whether or not you do that. Will we charge vacant properties? So council input on that was some sort of a reduction for the owners of rentals where they're sitting vacant maybe for several months at a time. I don't think we're going to have to worry about this anytime soon since there's not enough housing. So things don't sit very vacant around here right now. But it could in the future. And then the other question was, would the council vote or would they refer it to the taxpayers? There wasn't a lot of input on that one. And when will the implementation take place? We need to make the public aware at least 30 days in advance before we start the billing. I believe it would take the staff a couple months to get it implemented. So it could be, if we were trying to implement it and vote on it to start in the new year, it just depends on when the ordinance would be approved. It could be September before we started implementing it. And the other question was, will there be an oversight committee on this? And there was definite council input that they wanted to see some form of oversight committee on this transportation utility fee. Can we go forward? Okay, so we've done quite a bit of public outreach, but not lately because it was put on hold. So we did create an informational brochure. I checked in to see what it would take for us to reprint that and send it back out with some changes to it. And it could be done pretty quickly. We definitely then would update the website and possibly have more community open houses. The ordinance is designed, I don't know that if we need another council work session to design the ordinance, but we might need council to give more input on the completion of the ordinance. There will be 2 public hearings, so it is an ordinance. It requires 2 public hearings. Definitely, we would want to do newsletter articles and social media. So the timeline is that if we could update, if the council wants to move forward, we could do some updates by April 15th and get a distribution out to the public with at least a couple weeks for them to read it at a first reading, possibly May of the ordinance, and a second reading in June. And then implementation in August or September, just depending on when we get the work done. So the next decision, where are we at now? And this is a slide that we used before, but the the council needs to have a discussion on whether or not they're ready to start moving forward with this. We would complete the ordinance with council decisions in it and then bring it to council in an ordinance. Unless the council decides to put it to the voters. So that is a different thing. We can move forward, Sammy. I think that's it. Okay. We can take the PowerPoint down. Okay, that was a lot of information, I know, and it's quick, and it's just kind of reviewing what you've probably already seen. I do have a finance page created that we could play with for scenarios. I think it's really hard on Zoom because it's a very long and wide PowerPoint worksheet, but it basically allows for scenario testing. So I'm not sure if the council would like me to send that out to you and you can play with it yourself, because you could do that. But it basically looks at if we were to charge $5 over I think we looked at a 10-year period, we borrowed funding and we charged a TUF, what would it look like? How would we end up? And we can try to put it up if you would like, but I mean, if you'd like to, we can try to put it up. I'm just really concerned about what I'm seeing. So this is the first slide is just what is the street costs. Sammy, I don't think this is the right sheet.
That is, so
There should be toggles at the bottom.
yeah, no, I just got the one page of it. That was sent.
Okay.
Hey, Ann,
Yeah,
let's open up to some discussion and questions.
yeah, I think so. Let me,
There's a lot of information, and I think we need to refresh ourselves as to where we were a year ago when we postponed this.
Yep. That's
Right.
fine with me. Let me, well, I'm gonna try to send this to Sammy. And I see Brian has his hands up, so.
Go ahead, Brian. I just
Yeah, I
think-
just wanted to add a few things.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add a few things to what Ann had mentioned to you folks. A couple things to think about when we were talking about the grants and getting funding for grants for streets in the future. Those grants most often have to be shovel ready. So there is some engineering costs that have to go into pre-planning for projects, right? So in order for us to get the grant, we have to be able to say it's ready to go. So there's that cost. And another thing to think about when we're talking about all of this, this is just the street inventory that we have now. So none of this is projections on what could happen with new subdivisions, with the annexation property, what could happen with East Van Dyne once ODOT has said, you know, and the county, you know, that could be a real thing. We could end up with East Van Dyne, which could also lead into the city taking over Pearl Street and Willamette. Not that I'm advocating for that at all, but as we move into the future, those are real life things, right? Things that we are going to have to think about. A couple other things, Roberts Court, when we were talking about Roberts Road and Roberts Court, Ann did mention that some of that is not total reconstruction. Some of that is rehabilitation. So some of that is good base and good asphalt. So, you know, those costs are going to have to be adjusted a little bit. But when we do projects like this, depending on the funding mechanism, that could sidewalks, curb and gutter could come into play when we're talking about how the funding happens without the TUF. And I wanted to mention that we did go away from the CAPS report, and I think this is important for you guys to hear. We went ahead and decided during COVID that we were going to reevaluate how we were looking at the CPI. And what we did was we went with a different software. We did a lot of GISing, so this new street software that we have, it does not go by CPI, it goes by remaining service life. So when we start looking at this in the future, it's going to look different. So instead of that looking for the CPI of 70, we're going to be looking for remaining service life of 20 years. So when you start seeing those numbers, I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page, that you're going to be seeing different things as we move forward. Does anybody have any questions, or is everybody kind of got that idea?
That was good information, Brian. Thank you.
And one more thing, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
The oversight committee. I think that just for myself, clarification here on this, we're just talking about how the funds get spent, not how or where they get spent. Is that kind of what I'm getting from the oversight?
I'm not understanding.
Or is this going to be like a utility? Is this going to be like a utility commission, or is this going to be just an oversight of how the funds are being spent, or keeping track of those funds?
That's part of the feedback we were looking at from the council. If you remember, Ann had the slide up with 2 counselors who said yes, 1 said no. That's some of those questions that we have to determine as to how that was going to be done. And I think this is why part of why I wanted to stop and have a discussion here is, if we remember, when we go back, the committee made recommendations to us and we looked at it, and it's the efficiency, and Brian was the one, I believe, that made the point, it's the efficiency of the larger projects. Instead of doing $200,000 a year every year trying to catch up, we go out and we get financing and we do $1 million project and complete a large portion of it in a fiscal year or 2 years, and try and do everything within 5 years and then pay it off over 10 years or 20 years or whatever the project is. But that efficiency of doing bigger projects, bringing a contractor in and getting more done for the money that we would be spending. So that was one part of it. The other part was updating, because we knew the information might need some tweaking, and we found that out to be true. So the numbers do change. And I don't know if it would help if people if maybe we distributed the original recommendation from the committee to help us go back to that. I don't think we need to go to that point right now tonight, but that committee made a pretty good recommendation that we worked off of. But going forward, it's looking at those numbers, figuring out how much money we're going to spend and when we're going to spend it, and then how that revenue is going to pay that off. And those were those questions that Ann had in that PowerPoint slide through the middle of it that we need to answer. And the oversight, I'll just say my personal opinion is we do the same thing with our utility fees already, as we do an annual oversight of what our expenses and operations are down the road, and then determine what we need to do for a fee. And I think we should be doing the same thing if we implement this transportation utility fee, is to have an oversight. We also had some discussion about because of that, and with the significance of the amount of funds and just the vast overview of what that would be, is to have a utility committee or oversight committee just for that, to make a recommendation to council that council would act on. Is there anything anybody else recalls that feels they might help us with moving forward here? Councilor Lehman.
So I've got about 7 thoughts. I'll just throw them all out and we can pick and choose which ones we want to discuss. First of all, I think we should keep the street fee separate from this. I think the scope of work of that is significantly different than the work we're talking with improving the roads. So I'd like to keep the street fee or the tree fee separate, the tree fee separate. I would look at the $7 for the residential and $5 for the business, but I'd like to see how that would be proportionally shared between residents and businesses. Does that go 70-30%, 50-50% in terms of the total dollar amount we need to achieve? Is the burden going to be equal, or is it going to be
I think
more?
Ann has some documentation, because the comparisons I recall that we had some comparisons, and when we did a 7 and 7, the usage, the information that we had saying business was being charged disproportionately for their usage. And so I'm pretty sure we do have some old data that would help us support that, to answer that.
Yeah. So I'd like to see some specific examples. Is how much would Truck and Travel pay? How much would Coburg Pizza pay? Some of the businesses, so we can just visually see the impact of those businesses and what their proportionate share would be towards the total that we're going to try to raise. And I would think it would be a 5-year plan versus a 10-year plan. I like the idea of trying to do more of the infrastructure early, maybe by taking out a loan and use the TUF to be a resource to pay back the loan.
If I recall correctly, Councilor Lehman, I think what we were going for was a 5-year construction plan and a 10-year payoff.
Okay.
I think that's what I recall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say have it as a fixed amount rather than ongoing. It can always be reinstated. I think that would be a better selling point to the community than an ongoing, non-ending fee that we don't know what we will need in the future. So we can always reinstate it if we needed to. And then we're getting some new federal dollars, and we have some discussion about how we're going to allocate that. And I, for one, would like to see that dedicated towards the new public works building, if it were my 2 cents, and not have it go into the street improvement. I guess those were the main points. And I think it should be a council vote rather than refer to the city or the citizens. I just feel that we have to make some tough decisions. We all know our roads are in bad shape, and if we put it to a vote, then it's questionable whether we pass, but yet the problem's still there. And I think we as elected officials need to make those decisions in the best interest of the community and take that vote ourselves.
Thank you, Councilor. Good points and good statement. I agree. Councilor Fox.
I agree with Councilor Lehman about not putting it, that's what we're elected for, to make decisions like this. I had a couple of things. One, was this PowerPoint resent out to us? I kept looking for it, but I must have missed it. It was not. Okay, so it's very helpful because Councilor Bell mentioned earlier the pictures are worth 1,000 words. So if I was able to play with it now, because I started getting, my memory is not as good, and I was, lost in the sauce in some of those things.
This was a work in progress, so I'm sure we'll get it out to you.
Okay.
Get some numbers lined up on it.
Yes,
The
and
data was old. Was the
I'm
problem.
realizing that I sent the wrong PowerPoint to Sammy. I had done some tweaks to it, so I have one that has even more tweaks to it. Much the same information, but I will send that out after tonight. But there, And also I have a finance page that I can bring up tonight, but I can also send out. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to
Wait, I'm not done.
I want with that though, that it will also be available on our website for all of the people that are watching the live view
Oh,
and
good.
all of these documentations. It'll be posted by tomorrow morning at 10, whatever is sent to council.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sammy. Counselor Fox.
So, and I would caution again, if we're going to limit it rather than ongoing, which sounds better, we better project out very well the algorithm of the cost of all the expenses and anticipate failure. And I hate to say that, but when I was last on the council and on the metropolitan planning, there was some guy from Eugene who was the head street guy. Well, I'm sure he's moved on, but he talked about almost Roman roads and 50-year builds, and he was speaking music to my ears. You know, he dug down 3 feet on the sides and had all this stuff. And I watched him do some of that stuff as I drive around. And recently I'm taking my daughter to work, and I go on Roosevelt, which had a recent reconstruction, and it is a nightmare. The total, as far as I'm concerned, failure of money, because there are potholes on the sides and it fell in, and God forbid you don't want to go up the soft shoulder because it's like a 3-foot drop. So, you know, I want to make sure we do things and do things right, but there's a contingency for the oops factor, so that the pain of bringing money back after we've sent it away is you know, daunting. So that's my 2 cents. And the other thing is that Ann brought up this class versus, what was the other word? I can't even read my own handwriting. I was trying to read, but we went with the
Equitable
non-class
trips.
thing. Huh?
Equitable
Right.
trips.
But the software would work better with the class thing. So it'd be nice to see a distinction between those 2 things and an algorithm for that. So if the software works better with the class thing, I don't even remember that. I'm willing to chew it up because I'd rather have the software happy than us having to reformulate algorithms within the software. So
To add to
that's
that,
what I have for
Counselor
the moment.
Fox,
I'm sorry.
I want to add to that. I believe there was another part of that in that this class fee is what we use to help set our sewer fee. And so this book that lists all of these classes and gives you a factor to multiply by is what we use for the sewer. So it works better for what we're already doing, if I remember correctly. So that was another factor to that too.
Yeah, so I'd like to look at that. And the last thing I would like to echo Councilor Lehman's thing about seeing how Truck and Travel versus Coburg Pizza versus Reflection Salon versus the people that hardly get any business would be very helpful.
And I agree. And we did a little bit of that before, and that's where we started getting that discussion between standard fee and equitable, because there was some businesses that came back to us and said, I'm not paying $1,000 a month when I
Right, I
don't
remember
deserve
that.
So I agree. We need to get that information back up and freshen it and be aware of that. Good point.
I yield the floor.
Next. Brian.
I just want to address the 10-year sunset and kind of go back to what Councilor Fox just said. You know, trying to get a bunch of these reconstructions done in 5 years, as well as doing water projects at the same time, it might be a daunting task. And some of these reconstructs might be going in where water mains are going to be replaced in the next couple of years. So having the ability to push projects out past 5 years, we know that most of these roads that need reconstructed need it now. But they're also going to, if you push it out, they're still going to need it in 5 years plus, right? So, you know, the preventative maintenance stuff will be going on at the same time a lot of these reconstruction projects are going. And my biggest fear would be street project overload and clogging up a bunch of city streets, trying to get everything done in that 5-year span. I think that that's not just a lot for staff to take on. We're asking a lot of the citizens when we're trying to reconstruct a street 1 block over, and now we're going to reconstruct another street 2 blocks over. And stretching it out past 5 years is going to help us in the planning phase and the public outreach part of this as well. When we can say, here's what we want to do for the next 7 years. Here are the streets that we plan on doing this fiscal year A, fiscal year B, fiscal year C, and we can kind of map it out for them to where they know that in year 2025, their street is going to get rebuilt or repaved. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's, we were looking at just getting everything done for that efficiency right up front and have that financing in the first 5 years, spend big and save money. But it certainly makes sense. And the other part of it is the engineering and design work, like the surveying that's going on right now. If we have that stuff done and a grant comes up for a shovel-ready project and we've got the surveying and design work done, we can put up for the grant, and that would help us. So that 5-year, I don't think we could do this city in 5 years. Best of circumstances. So, but still something to look at where we still want to get that money and have it available up front and then pay it off down the road. Councillor Lehman.
Well, 2 other thoughts. I agree with those comments. And we also talked about doing the better streets first, just from a cost effectiveness. So that wouldn't take the engineering and surveying, and that could be done simultaneously while the better streets are taken care of first, and then the surveying can go on concurrently with that. So if there is a grant that comes on, that can move up in the priority. But the other thought I had was with regard to the $7 for residential and $5 for business. And there could be an economy of scale for businesses where there's a sliding class fee, so that truck and travel, which I assume would be the largest fee payee, might get a break from the $5 to be $4, just because of the volume that they would be putting into the project. So to counter some of those thoughts where I'm not going to pay $100,000 for the streets, it may not be the same rate for the largest of the businesses.
And that was, Councilor Lehman, that was some of the discussion about appeals. So that when a rate was set, that was the question that I recall was, would we allow an appeal so that we'll use truck and travel? I don't necessarily know they would be the most expensive, but whatever business says, wait, that's unfair, and here's my data to support my side. That was part of the appeals question there.
Yeah, so it could either be a strategy to do it up front or to do it on an appeals process.
Yeah. I think Councillor McConnell, and I saw Councillor Bell. We'll go with McConnell first.
Sorry. I have a concern about what Councillor Lehman was saying about truck and travel and something like a smaller business. How do you determine the impact, not only by how large they are, but by what type of travel, what type of trips are happening? Because truck and travel brings in trucks, and that's one of the things that's really having an impact on some of our streets. Whereas a hair salon, it's a single vehicle trip, and so that's a really big concern for me. I'm really wrestling with that in my mind about how we determine a class of business and giving discounts because they're a large business when the impact may be greater. So that's just a real concern of mine. And I also have a concern about the residential fee being a flat fee. And if it is a flat fee, then I am wondering how easy it would be for people to ask to appeal that, because we all know that there's a lot of low-income people in this town, and there's a lot of people who have a large home, a large family, and much greater impact. And so how do we make that equitable? The last point on council decisions here, is there an oversight committee? I definitely think we need an oversight committee. So those are some of my things.
So Councilor McConnell, I refer to this large book when I remember setting the sewer fees, that they list every kind of business. I mean, swimming pool Olympic to swimming pool entertaining, and they have this data somehow of how many trucks and how many cars come to this thing. And that's the basis that the engineers help us to set that. Then when we look at them and we determine, like truck and travel, well, one of the arguments I think truck and travel can use is they pay a lot of PUC fees to fix the roads. Those trucks pay the PUC, and that's part of the offset of the trucks being on the road, is they do pay a pretty significant fee, and that's part of the state sharing revenues that we get. Those are just arguments. I'm not saying that they would use those or not, but those are all parts of what we would look at, I think. And we certainly need some kind of an overview committee, because I think we need to have a basis for appeal and to be fair, both for residents and businesses. The resident thing, if we start putting a magnifying glass on it, then I think we start getting into just more and more problems trying to be fair with a $10 fee. Do we make it $8.75 because they only have one car versus the neighbor that has two cars? I don't know. So there's certainly some discussion with that, and I think that's some of the questions we have to answer. Councilor Bell.
I don't think I really have too much to add, except that I agree that the fee just needs to be ongoing, whatever we decide that fee should be. I think we can reduce it, or if that comes up down the road. But as Councillor Fox said, I don't want to take it, it's only going to be 5 years, and then we're at 5 years, or it's only going to be 10, and then we're saying, well, we stopped it back here, but now we're going to reinstate it. I don't want to do that. I would certainly not support that. And I think as a citizen of this community, I think, I don't want to pay any more fees for anything either, but I also recognize that to be a citizen and to live in a community, you have to be willing to be able to afford to live there. And I think we can't be splitting hairs about, well, there's a lot of low income people, there's lots of this, so we'll make these exceptions. I think it has to be on an appeal basis, and we just have to set the standard and move forward.
Thank you, Councilor Bell. Councilor Fox?
Back when we were putting in the sewer, we did a really careful study about an appeal, and I don't know if it was an algorithm, but a rate thing, and how it could be lowered based on where you fit in the appeal. So that should be looked at, because a lot of work went into that standard for people that might be in the mobile home park or whatever.
We do have a low income assistance, and surprisingly, it's not used as much as we think it should be. It's a very small portion of assistance in our utility billing. But we do have that process, and I think, and you might help me with that, but I think we had already talked about using that same system to go forward with the TUF as one of our discussion points.
Yeah, it would just follow through just as the rest of the utility billing does. So we would set a fee, and if somebody is low income, they could apply to have a reduced fee. And it would just be overall utility billing.
Just based on what I said, the follow-up, Sammy, if Sammy's still here, when they call in struggling with their utility bill, is that mentioned that we have such a program?
It's advertised 2 or 3 times a year, and it is an annual program. And by advertised, it goes out in the month before or 2 months before. So I think May for the June renewal with a copy of the criteria, the financial criteria. Then it also is posted on the website and social media.
So that kind of echoes what Councilor Bell is saying, and that they're willing to live in the community and pay what it takes.
Councilor Lehman.
It's kind of my impression that most of the residents and citizens of Coburg, when they will think about the transportation utility fee, is that they're going to interpret this as being a fee to get some significant road construction done in town because of the deteriorating road condition it is. So that's why my thought is of having it being a 5-year plan versus ongoing. Because after 5 years or 7 years, when the majority of the work is done, we won't need the same rate system in place for maintenance. So I would see citizens saying, why am I going to be paying the same rate ongoing if this is supposed to help us front load the deteriorating road? So if we do have it as an ongoing rate, I would like to see up front that we structure it at being a higher rate up front because of the heavier costs, and a lower rate after the major construction is done in 5 or 7 years. If we say that it's going to be ongoing as opposed to being fixed.
I would say that what I would like to see, and a lot of cities do, and I think we've done it before, is a sunset clause where we set a fee and for 10 years, and then it's just worded in the ordinance that the city council reviews further need after that point. So basically a review at the end of the sunset period, because that's what's going to happen anyway. If we set a 10-year or a 5-year or a 7-year, at the end of that, staff's going to come to us and say, we can afford it, we're doing fine, or we need more money because we've got more streets and more damage is happening or whatever. It's going to be reviewed. So I have no problem with putting a fee out for a certain amount of time. But to say forever, I think Councilor Lehman has some argument there that people aren't going to buy into that so much. But we certainly want to get a lot of work done as soon as we can. And then once that work's done, hopefully like we do with our other fees, hopefully we can keep them down or reduce them and be accountable. Councilor McConnell.
We haven't really discussed the question, number 10, will the city charge exempt organizations, and who are they if we do?
I think that's a question that would depend upon the financial situation. I don't want to say a blanket exemption for every nonprofit, because I think there's nonprofits that have plenty of money and have a budget to be able to afford to pay the services that we are all paying to provide. And then there's others that really don't have it, but they do provide a service to the community. And so it's a worthwhile thing. So once again, it's one of those where we have to kind of look at it and not provide a blanket exemption, but maybe some kind of what's their budget, what's their capacity in the community.
But we aren't doing that for residents. So why are we making that exception for nonprofits?
Well, that's a question that, when you look at an organization that's a nonprofit versus a residence that's a low incomes. And I think that's where the offset is for a resident, is to have low income assistance versus a nonprofit that has a low budget but does community service, and comparing that offset for the community.
So are we setting a fee structure for them, or how are we doing that? How are we doing that?
I would envision something where we would set a clause that would say that we would look at exemptions or reductions for nonprofits and then make a determination from there. And hopefully something similar to what we do with residential. If you're a low income and you meet the threshold, then we'll provide low income assistance to you. If you're a low income nonprofit, then we'll provide an exemption or a reduction for you. Versus a high volume, high dollar nonprofit that can pay their bills. That would be my idea. Ann?
I think that there's a distinction between nonprofits in our community that their members are serving this community in a huge way, that they are spending hours and funding back into the community. And then there are nonprofits that don't necessarily serve the community of Coburg. And so I think there is a distinction there. Our chamber is here for our community and our businesses. And the Grange obviously spends a lot of energy and money on the community. So I think there's a distinction to be made. And that would have to be a question of, those are the questions that you would have to be able to ask of how do they put it back into the community? So.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It's been a tough one for other utilities. So it's not a new question. Councilor Bell.
So how did we answer that question with other utilities? I'm
We
trying
didn't.
we didn't. Oh, okay.
We left it.
We
left
kicked
it.
that ball. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually,
Sammy? You're muted.
it is in both our water and our sewer ordinances, how the fee structure was set up. And that is one thing that our legal, when we're looking at our water and our sewer ordinances, have advised, is that we maybe consider having a utility ordinance so it is consistent, because there are some differences, and I may not articulate this correctly, Brian may have to help me, but there are some differences in the appealing a wastewater bill versus how you would appeal a water bill, and how it's administered. So I think it's important that those all three sync up for administering if we're going to be using one type of billing for it. So otherwise somebody could actually be going through 3 separate appeals to process a challenge to the city.
And this is something that we're trying to get uniform processes for our staff to deal with and have uniform answers to these things. And it has been an ongoing issue for years. And I think this goes back to the possibility of putting a utility committee together to address some of these things, to create some uniformity for process to our staff. Councilor Fox.
I think the uniformity concept is spot on. You don't want to have different levels for anything, but a nonprofit, whatever they may be, is not exempt from everything. They have to pay gas, electric, and other bills. They tend to be exempt from property taxes, but there's even taxes they have to pay within utilities, such as phones and stuff like that. So they're not exempt. You have to pay bills. You have to make the thing go.
Any other questions, discussion? So some of the things I'm seeing, I have notes that we need some comparisons to look at how the standard fee and equitable trips fee process would look for businesses, to give some specific examples. We need to make the determination, I think a couple simple ones, whether the council's going to vote or we're going to put it to a vote of the people. I think after this discussion, we definitely need an appeal process, and we should be looking at all three utilities for that process, so for uniformity. We need to look at the term, whether we're going to sunset this, how many years we're going to put it forward. I think Ann and Brian have been working hard trying to get some accurate numbers for us on the costs of all of these, and then looking at the workload down the road. And we're already doing a lot of what Councilor Lehman referred to as getting the maintenance and then the design work. We're paying engineers to be out here to survey and get things lined up so that they're ready. And we hopefully can take, advantage of grant opportunities more. We do get grants pretty consistently. Roberts Road is, I think almost all of the work done on that has been grant money over the years. It's obviously not enough, but we do have that availability. The street tree fee is something that is still a question. Councilor Lehman said he'd like, I forget what you said. Did you wanted to keep that street tree fee and run the streets separate?
Yes, keep it separate.
But that's just input for now. So I think the work for our staff right now is to get some of those examples, get the worksheet, the spreadsheet working for us so that we can look at what that revenue will do and give us an idea of what kind of a timeline we need for both the construction and for the revenue to pay that off. Is there anything else councilors can think of? I see Paul Thompson's on. Welcome, Paul.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yes, I have been here all along. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just seeing you pop up on my screen.
Mayor,
any-
I was able to send that spreadsheet to Sammy, so I can just show it to you and then I can send it out and you can play with it yourselves if you'd like. Because I
Yeah, so
think
you-
that, I'm sorry.
So you can show us how to play with it.
I can show you how to play with it a little
Okay.
bit so you can experiment with it yourselves if you'd like. If Sammy can put it up. Sammy, I sent it to your email. Just a little bit more while I'm waiting for that. Trip fees are standardized nationally based on the business. And so if even though we might choose the class system, we would still have to determine the trips for a business. So basically what we would do is break those businesses into maybe 6 classes that this, if you have this many trips to this many trips, you're in class 1. And so, but standardized trips, that's a standardized thing that depending on what kind of business you do. So this is the spreadsheet that I'm talking about. So if you, this is the, Sammy, can you go back? This is the business class showing if we were to charge by business class.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you come down here so you can drive this and show?
I would love to. Thank you.
So counselors, make sure that we have a list of things that you want from staff to work further on this and be able to start working on fine tuning our decision here.
So Mayor, this is Nancy.
Yes.
So the question about whether we would charge ourselves or other tax supported businesses, or like the school or the fire department. I'm not saying it quite right. I think that's something that needs to be thrown into the mix too, and we need to really look at. It almost seems like double taxation to me, but I can be convinced otherwise.
It was a very frustrating thing when we did the LID for the sewer, and then the city paid that square footage fee for all of its properties, including the parks and everything. Legal seemed to think that was the best way to go, and council agreed. So I definitely agree that that's a discussion item.
Thank you. Okay. So this first sheet I was just going to show you is an example of class trips and revenues from those classes. So you would define your classes, and we defined 0 to 100 trips. No matter what kind of business you are, if the standardized trip for your business was 0 to 100, then you would be in a class 1. And so we would build as many classes as we need. In this particular one, we built a class 6 for community partner and fraternal organizations, but that was just, and it was at a reduced cost. So in this spreadsheet, this is a 10-year plan it shows the first 5 years, or the first 5 years, we're looking at a lot of projects. We're doing a bond purchase of about a little less than $2 million. And then we are getting a lot of work done in the first 5 years. With this at $8, and this is just, we're just doing some financial, at $8 at residential and $8 business, we're maintaining our, pretty much maintaining our street funding. But this is an example of using classes to define the revenue. If we were to look at a $7 per equitable unit on businesses, we did break businesses down between, this is $7 for residential and $7 for businesses. And so there is like downtown businesses, an average of 75 trips. We did a lot of work to kind of average out to get to here. But what that would look like is that we were starting again with 650. We're ending up a little bit better. We're getting $33,550,000 in work done over a 5-year period. And we're borrowing 1.9 million. So the TUF is definitely kicking in and helping to pay some of those costs. We have some grant funding. We're including some grant funding with the SDA grant, which is a state grant. And we're also including some additional regional funding in the 24 to 27 area. So anticipating that we could hopefully get funding for at least one other project through the STIP funding. So that is the $7. And then the next one is an $8, again, starting with $650,000 and ending up a little bit better still with the $8 charge. And this is $8. We're borrowing a little less money, so we're only borrowing 1.6, and we are still doing the same amount of work. So it depends.
And I have a question.
Yes.
When was this last updated approximately?
We just did this. So this is new. I just did these new financial sheets based on what we know. So the grant funding is either secured or anticipated. And the bond purchasing, what we did is just say, okay, if we charged more, we could borrow less money. It's gonna have to be paid. So we're showing that it's being paid off over 10 years. So that's why we have stretched this out for 10 years. But in the end, all along, you can see that with the exception of a year here, the fund is maintaining itself pretty well. And so we're not dropping down into the red zone on the fund. I can send these out. Like I said, you can play with them. We could say that, we want to do a little bit more work or borrow a little bit more money or whatever. You can play with these, and that's what they're meant for, is you can do some scenario testing with it. We could easily look at what if we charge $5? That would be an easy to create another spreadsheet and show what would happen. We would probably have to borrow more money, and we would charge $5. Businesses, if we were to go with when we go with trips, every business is going to have to individually to decide where they fit. And I don't know how we get around it. You have to look at what is the business they do, and then what does that mean for how much square foot do they have? But then remember that we have a business in the warehouse district that has 5,000 square feet and 3 employees. So, and they're not doing a bunch of work on the roads. The other thing that I think it's really important to recognize when you're talking about truck and travel and some of those businesses out by the freeway is they come in on a county road and they spend very little time on local streets. So when you're looking at truck and travel, the only local street that those trucks are really traveling onto is when they turn into the truck stop. And so that's where your appeal process would probably have to be that truck and travel would be able to appeal and say, look, we don't spend all that time on the local road. Anyway, those are just a couple of things that I wanted to point out.
And so it is very helpful because it's visual and I'm big on that. But if I could get a cheat sheet, not the 6,000 page tome that the mayor referred to, so that I could get some businesses that could associate with the classes. Because just to look at the classes without the beauty parlor or whatever, so I could fit some concepts of Coburg in there, that would help me.
I have to look for it. Long ago, we did do some examples of different kinds of businesses in Coburg and what their trips would be. So I will look and dig that out and send it out. This is only this has 4 sheets on it, and I'm happy to send it just so you guys can look at it a little closer. I was going to say, this is your $5 one where you're borrowing the most of bond purchase of 2.4 million. You're still getting the same work done. We're still ending up in a healthy place with the fund, but you are borrowing more money. So there's different ways of looking at it. If it's more important to reduce the cost to the taxpayer on a monthly basis and borrow more money that you pay for it a little longer. So just some thoughts for you to think about. So I could definitely send this out. I could send examples of businesses out to you as well. And we might be able to even do a few more. I think we did about 10 businesses that we gave examples on.
Okay. Is there anything else counselors can think of that they need to help them with this as we move on?
Is it helpful for me to send the ordinance out with the notes? I think we have it as part of this meeting, but we do have the ordinance with the notes from the counselors to the side. So they are tracked questions and answers from counselors. That I think that would be helpful for you to look at.
I would like that.
Counselor McConnell?
I do have a copy of that. I stopped by City Hall today and got all this paperwork. So it is helpful to have it in front of me anyway. So thank you.
And I have a copy too.
So that I can send that out as well. No problem.
Well, I think the timeline and the publication of information and informing our public again is very important, so that we give them their opportunity for input on this. So really, we have a lot of data that needs to be updated a little bit, but we need to educate.
You're cutting out.
You're broken up.
He froze.
Is
I think we might have lost him. Mayor.
He's still talking.
It's the Twilight Zone.
Oh, he's moving.
He's moving next to his thing.
He's moving in his house.
Watch out, Claire. Here he comes.
Must be something in the air today. My computer came back up and I thought, oh, it's going to work. And then I went to push the button and it went back down. It's like.
unable
There he
to
is.
hear anything, and I don't see how I'm going to fix it to get it better. So I don't know if it's me or something.
I can hear you.
You're back. You're back.
Or text.
You returned from the Twilight Zone.
Okay. So I guess I'm not muted. Nancy, why don't you just step in and kind of throw the conclusion? We won't have any votes or anything tonight. But Ray will.
Well, I'm not sure. All right,
Unmute.
Ray, you're-
Mayor, can you unmute? Okay, so we've asked staff to send out some more information to us as counselors. And what's our timeline to get responses back to staff?
Well, I guess for me, I need some time. I would love to hear what the council idea of when they see this being implemented, because I think that's going to really help staff. I mean, if you see this as being implemented as soon as possible, then I would say council needs to get it back within a couple of weeks, so that we can start pulling all of your answers on the ordinance and stuff together, because that still needs to go for legal review before it can come to council. If you're looking to pass it in this fiscal year so that it can be implemented in the next fiscal year, we need to move on it.
That makes sense. Looks like Mayor is back. Are you back, Mayor? You have to unmute. There you go.
I'll find it all first. I am back, and I'm sitting on top of my modem right now, so I have the strongest signal possible. Sorry about that.
Probably hurts. Sorry, couldn't resist.
But it sounds like you took over, President, and did the job.
Well, I just asked for a timeline to get input back. And so I'll let you go forward at this point.
Well, I think at this point, I'll ask Ann what she needs, whether she needs any clarification, and then give counselors a last chance before we call it a night.
I think I'd like to send out the ordinance again if you don't already have it, and have counselors again look at the questions in that ordinance. And if you haven't already answered them, and I think that did the ordinance that you got today, Counselor McConnell, have the names?
Yes, I printed it for.
Yes, and so I actually listed the names of the counselors so that they could see, yes, they did give input on that question. So if you don't see your name,
Oh, okay.
not receive your input on these questions. So go ahead and give it to me. That way I can start putting the ordinance together. If you can get, I mean, as soon as possible, but I know everybody's busy, within a couple weeks would be great. I said, my question is, how fast does the council wish to implement this? That is going to be very important to the staff because we have to update information as far as sending the brochure back out to the community again, and providing plenty of information for the community to read it, and then giving them information ahead so that they know when the council will address this. So I need to hear from the council. When do you want to implement this?
Counselor Lehman.
Well, number one, will you reach out to the other two counselors who are here tonight, kind of schedule a meeting to give them, get them up to speed on the conversation tonight? And number two, you gave a timeline with an implementation in September, I thought looked very reasonable.
Okay.
That would be council action in June. Was that right, Ann?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I'd like to see it before July.
It's going to take the staff some time because we're going to have to look at every individual business in the community. And so that will take some time. So, but yes, if you're comfortable with that timeline, then that's what we would shoot for.
Hey, like Counselor Fox said, that's what we'll plan for and then plan for failure.
They expect failure.
I think our staff could pull it off, but I think that timeline you had, Ann, was very reasonable, and I think it'll work for us.
Okay. What would help me also is if I'm going to send out the spreadsheet, the financial spreadsheets, and if you can look at them and possibly give me your input on which funding scenario we need to go with. That would help me as well.
Okay. Counselor Bell.
Just so the one that the scenario that matches best with our financial program is which choice? Just tell me that again. It's the class, is that right?
Yeah.
Class versus trip.
Yeah, class.
Okay.
It's going to be really hard for our staff to implement a separate charge in for every single business in our system. That's going to be an incredible amount of work. Whereas, the sewer, the way the sewer and the water set up, there's selections, and that everybody fits into one of them, and so it's definitely going to be a better way for us to track it. The other piece that I thought I would mention is that changes that take place during the year for businesses and things like that, that we will have to think about, how do we track that? Do we track it by planning? So if they decide to expand their business, then there's a planning aspect to that, and then that triggers a review at that point, and that often triggers reviews by water sewer. So that,
And that just once again reinforces getting that uniformity between all of our utility billing,
right?
Having that process for every one of them.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions from counselors? Counselor Lehman.
Yeah, back to a comment I made earlier about the additional federal dollars coming through the CARES Act or whatever it's called. That was somewhere between 150,000 to 200,000 for Coburg.
It'll be about $240,000. It's, and I will provide a staff report on that. That has very specific uses. I mean, there's a wide variety of them, but but they are a very specific wide variety of what it can be used for. And so I will be providing a report on that.
Okay, so is that going to be a recommendation from you, or is that going to be open discussion for council?
I absolutely open discussion for council. The council is going to ultimately make that decision. What I will do is provide you some feedback on what are some of the greater needs for the community that I'm aware of. So one of the funding mechanisms is, I will just give you kind of a highlight that is economic development and in building, you know, the tourism and, you know, just returning the community back to normal. So one of the things that we've looked at is that every festival, every concert, all of those things were canceled last year. So our chamber has no revenue. So it's not like you can just turn the switch back on and say, okay, now start all the festivals all over again, or all the concerts all over again. They receive no revenue. So that's one idea that we could possibly provide chamber some funds to help get our festivals and concerts back up and running. Community broadband is a huge issue. That is one source that can be funded. So there's a whole list. I will provide it for you, and we'll give you some insight on what we see, but ultimately it's the council's decision as to what you want to do with that money. And just to make sure that you understand that that money will come in two pieces, one maybe in June of this year, and the second half a year later is what we're hearing. So, yeah. So I'll try to give you as much information as possible so you can have a good discussion, and then just look for staff direction on where you want to go with that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other counselors? Looks like we're good. We're going to close up before 8 o'clock. Good discussion. It's a big topic. I know we had a lot of discussion last year over the months, and so looks like we have some good homework possibilities coming up, and get those back in a couple of weeks, and we'll start the decision process. Public input is the big thing, so we got to probably get that brochure updated and get that out, and have some good solid speaking points to work with our community. All right, I'm gonna close this at 7:52. Thank you, counselors and staff. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Text in there. Really? Not the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint was fine. Okay. It was the final.